Hi, I'm Tiffany.
And I'm Rihanna, and welcome back to Fresh Off the Broke.
Fresh Off the Broke is about personal experiences growing up Asian American in a predominantly white community, Asian media, and Asian pop culture in general. Race has always been a sensitive topic. Every day there are debates over race. With our podcast, we intend to shed light on the experiences of first-generation Asian immigrants, not set them on a pedestal.
We understand that race isn't everything, but there should be an acknowledgement of people of color, the knowledge gap, and the racial divide that will ideally be broken. Now that that's out of the way, let's get into the episode. Today we're going to be discussing the importance of Asian civic engagement.
As you may have seen from our Instagram, today is going to be a collab episode with Asian Youth for Civic Engagement, also known as AYCE. We're going to let them introduce themselves, so let's start the collab.
Okay, so do you guys want to introduce yourselves and tell our audience a little bit about what you guys do?
Sure. Okay, I guess I'll go first. So my name is Abigail. I am the Executive Director of Asian Youth for Civic Engagement, which is a student-led organization dedicated to mobilizing Asian American and Pacific Islander high school students for a path of civic engagement, political and social awareness, and finding their identity. I am a rising sophomore, and I live in New Orleans, Louisiana.
Hey, I'm Camille. I started ACE, Asian Youth for Civic Engagement, about a year ago. And so now I'm just kind of here to be on the advisory board. I was the former executive director. And yeah, I am a rising college freshman, and I'm from St. Pete, Florida.
So, what are your thoughts on, the political environment over at the U.S. in terms of elections and current events?
It's generally very unstable, much more recently so, especially with the pandemic, obviously, and also with increasingly tense race relations. But yeah, it's a generally very divisive climate, I would say so.
Okay, cool. We just wanted to ask because we're based in Canada and we already had an election in 2019, so there's nothing really new revolving around that. And, as Canadians, the most we can do is see through the news what's going on in the US rather than actually be there on the scene.
Right.
Speaking of current events, what are your thoughts on Black Lives Matter and Asian involvement in that?
I guess I can take this one. So running ACE, we have to be really aware of all of the specific issues that impact Asian American high school students and Asian American communities. And recently, due to Black Lives Matter, we've had to bring our attention to minority solidarities specifically. And we have opened a separate segment for a webinar and panel series where we invite Black, queer, femme activists who will talk to us about these specific issues and why it's important for us to all band together. And I think specifically, this kind of goes back into historical context, but it relates back to the minority myth in a way, which was introduced by the government during the 60s in an effort to quiet, the civil rights movement. And actually, Black protesters and Asian protesters fought alongside one another on issues such as voting and housing and wage issues. However, the government created this model minority myth to kind of essentially tell Black people that if you are submissive and obedient and you do your job without question, you will be rewarded and treated equally as a minority. So they kind of used Asian Americans as that quote unquote example to other minorities, which is why we have, generally in society, we are not as oppressed as Black Americans due to, the historical context and also because of the minority myth. But we are still silenced and we are obedient and subservient as well. So I think this myth continues to prevail in API communities, which is why Asian political involvement is so low. However, with the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement and how it continues to gain traction, I think it's even more important that the Asian American community stands alongside them and speaks up as well, right? Because at the end of the day, we all are fighting for the same cause. We're fighting for, equal treatment of each other. And I think it's important that we go against this model minority myth and help out our Black peers. Because at the end of the day, minority solidarity is the most important thing in terms of changing the status quo.
Yes, definitely.
you kind of touched upon it earlier, but could you talk about why you started ACE?
Yeah, so I think like specifically, I can only speak for the United States because I don't know what the statistics are in Canada, but
Yes, no problem.
yeah, out of all of the racial groups in America, Asian voter turnout is the lowest of all of them. Hispanic Americans also vote at very low rates. And essentially, the goal initially of Asian Youth for Civic Engagement was to kind of create a generational change. So focus on Gen Z, people who aren't of voting age yet, and kind of mobilize them and inform them and give them the resources to empower themselves and become politically aware so that they are kind of part of the political conversation that has left out Asian Americans for a very long time and become that mobilized force that goes out to vote in the polls. So it's really like a response to like a statistical problem that we see or trend that we see among Asian Americans, and combined with the youth not going out to vote and tackling that specific demographic and ensuring that there are resources for those people to have the incentive to go out and vote. But more recently, we've tried to focus a lot more on kind of like AAPI identity as well, so Asian American Pacific Islander. And so not just becoming politically informed, but becoming politically informed about specifically your own identity and how being Asian American impacts politics and policy.
Yes, of course. I'm actually glad you mentioned that last part, being Asian and how that, being Asian American, how that affects politics. We were gonna bring out racism in elections and how that kind of plays out. For example, Andrew Yang, when his numbers went down during COVID. Well, I guess the COVID outbreak.
Yeah, I think I can go over this. So I guess, based on chronological events, I'd say Andrew Yang dropped out before COVID became a serious issue in America. So I guess him, dropping out wasn't necessarily a cause of COVID racism, but I guess when you look at the article he wrote, from the Washington Post, we Asian Americans are not the virus, but we can be a part of the cure. That has a lot of correlation between Andrew Yang and COVID-19 racism. Specifically, there was a part in his article where he said that Asian Americans have to be more American. We have to wear like American flag swim trunks or something like that.
Red, white, and blue.
Yeah. So I think, I understand what he's trying to say, but the issue is it implies that Asian Americans have to become more westernized and less Asian to be accepted, and this is not just, independent to COVID-19, but also in general, which I think is a big problem because it furthers the narrative that erases API presence and identity in America, and it keeps us out of the political and social and media discussions. And if you look into entertainment now, there are still very few Asian actors, even though we have been gaining more coverage with, prominent movies like Crazy Rich Asians, and then getting more Netflix shows featuring Asian American actors. But still, like in political discussions and in social discussions, like we're rarely included. And even if you look at statistics and polling, sometimes they don't even include Asian Americans in the polling. So I think that's an issue that comes out of us, being erased and our identity and presence being erased, which is why it's really important that people like Andrew Yang, who represent the Asian American community in the political field, don't say things like, be more American, like wear the flag on yourself, and to like kind of rob you of your Asian identity just so people can accept you. So I guess like in reality, we don't need to be more American to prove our allegiance to the US. I think that being Asian American is an identity which is, mixed with so many different cultures and so many different experiences in itself, and it should be valued. It should be seen more. We should be heard more. So I think when people like Andrew Yang say things like that, it really harms that kind of effort,
I was going to say that I totally agree, because it kind of perpetuates the model minority thing, being more American, being more obedient. and fitting the American standard so that we're out of harm's reach. For example, there was this one line in his essay he wrote: during World War II, Japanese Americans volunteered for military duty at the highest possible level to demonstrate that they were American. Now, many in the Asian American community are stepping up, trying to demonstrate that we can be part of the solution. Some 17% of US doctors are Asian and rushing to the front line. Like the part where he said at the highest possible level to demonstrate that they were American, it seems as if people have to push harder to be American at the standard, well, to reach the standard of being American, you know, fighting in the war, doing all these things.
It kind of plays into the idea of perpetual foreigner, which is just this concept that no matter how long Asians are here, or whatever their Americanness is, how integrated they are or assimilated they are into the culture, they will never be American enough. I think that's true with Japanese Americans, especially with internment camps, where they were just full-fledged American citizens and they were deemed as foreign perpetually during the war. And when Andrew Yang cites that as an instance of Asian Americans empowering themselves, it's actually just highlighting the fact that they were doing basically everything they could just to be normal Americans, but they were still viewed as foreigners and still be like, people were still racist towards them.
Also, I kind of want to add on to that in a modern context. I think even today, Asian American high school students and teenagers, they still struggle with identity. You know, there's always that saying, you are too Asian for America and too white for your home country in Asia. And I think that's a struggle that a lot of Asian American high schoolers identify with, and it is really difficult. And there's a lot of things that sprout from not being able to understand identity or not being able to really know who you are. So I think it's really important for those who represent us in media and those who represent us on a greater platform, they really speak to that and tell us that it is okay to be both. It's okay to be both American, it's okay to be Asian, and that other people should respect our culture and respect this unique part of being Asian American.
Honestly, I think that especially now, there's going to be more people coming together identifying as Asian American because of a lot of children of immigrants coming to America and Canada also. There's more of that first generation culture that's coming together.
Yeah, definitely.
Also, a Canadian example would be Jagmeet Singh. He was ordered out of the House after calling a Bloc MP racist. The Bloc MP was against an anti-racism bill, and he was also victim to racist attacks during the 2019 elections.
Oh, just a clarification on the Bloc. So in Canada, our main parties, we have Conservative, Liberals, NDP, which is the New Democratic Party, which was the party that Jagmeet Singh led. Well, not led, but he was the leader of the party at the time, and I guess he still is now. Yeah, he is. Sorry. And then the Bloc, the thing is, there's a history in Canada of Quebec wanting to distance themselves from Canada and being their own area, kind of like Brexit when they were leaving when the UK was leaving the European Union.
Yeah.
And so Quebec actually has a very long history of racism, well, along with the rest of Canada, but it's just, in terms of modern history, they're a little crazier. There's many instances of Islamophobia. For example, Jagmeet Singh, when he was in Quebec campaigning, he would be speaking to Quebecois people, that's what they refer to themselves as, in French, because Canada is a bilingual country, and then people walking by would just shout racial slurs at him because he wasn't the ideal Canadian that they wanted to represent them.
Yeah, I think this is kind of like a two-part issue, right? One is kind of Jagmeet Singh and his climb upwards to being represented in parliament as a minority while facing all of these different obstacles. So I think that is a struggle that is indicated in, America as well, because it's difficult for someone of color, a minority of color, to be able to gain that kind of level of recognition in politics in the first place. So I do think that, him being there is a win in itself, right? It is an achievement in itself. And I think that's really important to have more representation in the institutions that kind of govern us and determine, our futures and the laws that we'll have to abide by. Yeah, I let Camille take over like this specific instance of Jagmeet Singh and the Bloc MP situation.
Yeah, so correct me if I'm wrong, but like just based on what I understand of the situation, he was ordered out of the house because he called someone racist, right? Like specifically saying that.
Yeah.
Was it like because he was going against like parliamentary rules, or was it like an isolated instance? Like for example, like if someone speaks out like that, would like if even if they weren't saying that someone else was racist, would they also get kicked out?
The thing is, I haven't been to a debate in Ottawa, but I was at a debate at Queen's Park, which is the I guess Parliament of Ontario, and the rules aren't that strict. I witnessed a debate about donating plasma. It wasn't the most important conversation that they were having, but at least from the rules that we learned, it didn't seem as if someone just spoke out, they would get ordered out. If someone spoke out, someone would say, hey, if someone else is talking, you can talk after them, one person at a time. I think maybe because it was more the remark that he called him racist, that people were like, okay, we're gotta go, calm down, kind of thing.
Yeah, so I'm just my 2 cents here. Like, I think that if this was an isolated instance, then the parliament should look into specifically what it makes its exceptions for. But overall, it's definitely a good thing for Singh to be represented in the House and to be advocating for anti-racism bills. But probably in order to have like more productive conversations with people who aren't specifically for the bill, I wonder if there could have been a better way to get to the other person besides calling him racist. Because it seems that whoever ordered him out of the house deemed him as like disruptive, right? And so that doesn't really help to the conversation if he's not able to even be in the conversation because he's being disruptive.
Yeah, because the reason why it was proposed was because of current events. They were trying to pass an anti-racism bill so that, well, I guess it was more Jagmeet Singh trying to pass the anti-racism bill because he was the one that proposed it, to try to create a safer environment for Canadians, right? And then the Bloc MP, I'm not, like, don't quote me on this is more me putting it in my own words, but he was very much against it. And then Jagmeet Singh was saying, so if you're against an anti-racism bill, then doesn't that kind of just make you racist? Because do you not believe in the safety? Like that's kind of what happened. And
I don't know. I guess like I understand if someone opposes an anti-racism bill, it would come off as them, being racist. But I think what's more important is actually getting the bill passed in the first place, right? They're in the parliament not to talk about whether this person is racist or not, but the debate about how we will implement this anti-racism bill, right? Whether we should implement this anti-racism bill. So I guess like I understand his intent, Mr. Singh's intent. I think it's important to push for those kinds of measures in a country that is divided. I think we should have more representatives that do that. However, when you focus the conversation as, on one person, you are making the debate about that person and whether or not that person is racist or not, when in reality you should be talking about the bill that you're going to be implementing for all people of color. So I think I wouldn't say, you know, that House is really justified in kicking him out for the whole day. But I guess, like, I understand why, because when you stray away from a conversation that would impact people's lives, I guess you would be marked as disruptive.
Yeah.
No, yeah, I see where you're coming from, because I guess when you're trying to have a productive conversation, I think maybe the reason why he reacted that way was because, you know, personally he was probably upset since he's been a victim of racism, especially during his campaigning. So
Yeah,
you could say it was
definitely.
more of an impulse response.
Yeah,
And,
I agree. Mm-hmm.
you know, if, for example, the two of us were to have a conversation and then because I disagreed with you, I called you something, that would turn into a different type of conversation.
Yeah, I
You know, like
definitely
the
think so.
atmosphere would change.
I think, I don't know if because I'm not really well versed in like Canadian politics, and how they debate things. But I think if it's a set precedent that if you say something like that, you know, that's, I guess, out of line in terms of the debate, then you would be excused, and it has been done before within the parliament. I think, I don't know, I think it's fair to excuse him because it is already an implemented rule. But in that case, you know, if it wasn't, then I don't think it was necessary. I think it's all about what precedents were set before and what the actual conversation is about, you know?
Yes, I agree. One thing that I wanted to bring up, since we were talking about Jagmeet Singh and how the whole, when you're trying to have a productive conversation, sometimes maybe saying that someone's racist or, I don't know, making a bold statement could lead to a different atmosphere in the conversation. Have either of you seen the TikTok that a Harvard graduate made recently?
She basically threatened to, well, not threatened, but she said that if she stabbed an All Lives Matter person, she would watch them bleed out and then show them her paper cut on her finger and say, but all stab wounds matter, something like that.
Yeah, hang on, I'm gonna play it.
Yeah,
I think we're allowed to do that. Okay.
Audacity to say all lives matter. I'm gonna stab you. I'm gonna stab you. And while you're struggling and bleeding out, I'm gonna show you my paper cut and say, my cut matters too.
Okay, that was it.
Yeah,
Did you guys get that?
I think
Okay.
that type of dialogue while I can understand why someone would be frustrated and compelled to make or say something like that, it kind of just sheds a bad light on the Black Lives Matter movement, because already people or the media paints Black Lives Matter as predominantly violent when that isn't the case. And so I think that kind of adds fuel to the fire and not only like makes the movement look bad, but doesn't really convince anyone.
For sure.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, because the thing is, as a result of the TikTok blowing up, she lost her entry position at Deloitte. She was going to be, hang on, it says, incoming government and public business service analyst.
Nice.
And the thing is, I don't know, Rihanna and I discussed this earlier when this video came out, but personally, I feel like if I were the CEO of a company and my company stood for, you know, equity and, you know, I feel like it sounds a little cheesy if you say your company stands for diversity, you know what I mean? But, you know, if your company supported Black Lives Matter and stuff like that, I just feel like, because Clara, she hadn't entered her position yet. She was an incoming worker at Deloitte. And I think I personally wouldn't want someone whose video, while it may have been satirical, because she said, you know, while you're bleeding out, I'm going to show my paper cut. She's not actually going to do that to someone. It's still considered a violent threat, and it makes the company look like it's taking on a different perspective on Black Lives Matter.
Yeah, definitely. I know a lot of people are defending her, because the company fired her, or I guess took her off of the internship. What was I gonna say? I think,
Don't worry about it.
I don't know. I feel like you have to, when you're up for something like that, you have to take in a level of professionalism and be careful what you're going to say. And I think that happens on all levels, right? And I do understand her frustration. I guarantee that a lot of people feel that way too. But I feel like posting it on social media, A, isn't good for herself or her company, and B, isn't really good for the Black Lives Matter movement, right? Because they're not trying to fight for, more chaos. They're not trying to fight for division. They're not trying to fight for a quote unquote like race war, right? They're trying to fight for peace. They're trying to fight for equal treatment of Black people and the abolition of police brutality. So I think, when you counter those harsh words from the All Lives Matter people, and their threats, with other threats, it makes the situation really heated. And I don't think that's what Black Lives Matter as a whole wants to achieve.
Yeah, and at least, well, I saw this through Nextchart, but in the comment section, there were a lot of Black people saying how she kind of shifted the narrative into something that was a little more violent, and that wasn't the original intent of Black Lives Matter.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
They were saying how they appreciated her support, but they didn't want people to perceive it as a violent protest. Well, not protest, but a violent movement, as that's what they're trying to stray away from. Because that's the image that people are painting on Black Lives Matter, right?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Yeah, definitely. I agree. I think at the end of the day, what Black Lives Matter is trying to achieve is peacefulness, come to an agreement, come to a deal with the government and with their local communities and governments to make sure that Black people don't have to face all of these injustices every single day. And the way to achieve that isn't through threatening the other side, and isn't through, expressing your inner frustrations. I guess it's by peaceful protesting, which is what the majority of the Black Lives Matter movement is doing right now.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of problems with, current social media mixing with all this activism, because a lot of people are making it a trend. I don't know if your circles are like this, like personal, like friend groups, but it's really sad to see that people are treating it as just some sort of Instagram, like repost blindly, and that's your part of this movement.
Definitely. I think personally for me, you see a lot of slacktivism is the term, when you just repost something that you see on your page, which doesn't actually contribute to any impact. I think it's important to educate people using social media as a medium for that. But at the end of the day, you do have to be at those protests. You do have to create substantial things to really maximize your contribution. I understand, there are young kids who can't really donate because they don't have any money themselves, but a better way to show your support, a better way to create an impact is not to just simply post something on your story, but also be there, attend educational webinars, attend protests, right? And I think signing petitions is really important too. But also, I don't know, I feel like another issue with these petitions now, especially since online activism is getting really big and growing, it's difficult to tell which petitions are legitimate and which ones are just scams.
Yeah.
So I definitely think the best way to show support is to show up at those protests. It is to educate yourself. It is to find legitimate petitions to sign and to donate to, and not just, oh, today I'm just going to be politically active. Today I'm going to be an activist, and tomorrow I'm going to take a break. So
yeah, I agree with that, because it's not about posting on social media to show that you're doing more than someone else, because if the reason why you're quote unquote doing your part is because you want someone to think that you're better than them because you reposted more pictures than them, then that's kind of a problem, right? Because it's like the people that are I guess offline educating themselves and attending protests rather than people, because I've seen on social media there were people that were at protests and then posting for fun, you know what I mean? Some people, I heard that there were people that got drunk and then went to the protest because they thought it would be funny.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like we shouldn't disrespect the hard work that the organizers of Black Lives Matter and, all of their supporters and what they do to organize these protests. I personally, there are a lot of the people that I know, they would deliberately go out on social media to see who posted what about Black Lives Matter. And if you didn't post anything, then you are not for Black Lives Matter. And I just don't think that is a good way of seeing who is politically active or not,
for sure.
Because, for me, I don't really feel I've made an impact when I post something or I repost something on my story, right? I feel like I've made an impact when I'm actually there, when I'm actually organizing things, and when I'm being a part of the physical movement. And I think that is something that a lot of high schoolers don't know how to do but want to be a part of. So I guess that's kind of what AYCE wants to focus on too in the future.
There was actually a post going around that people that we know were reposting that was saying that I'm gonna write down all the usernames of the people who don't post about Black Lives Matter, and I'm gonna unfollow everyone. And it's like, there's so many things, so many reasons why someone wouldn't post about these things. That doesn't have to do with the fact that they don't support the movement, like there's so many different circumstances, and people are taking it pretty far when it comes to trying to show their support, but sometimes it ends up backstabbing them.
Right.
Yeah, definitely. I think I'm really glad that people are, trying to get themselves to be civically and politically engaged. I'm glad that so many young people are educating themselves about these really important social movements and these really important issues. And, when you talk to a regular Gen Zer now, like, they'll say they'll give you the most in-depth analysis of all of these different issues, right? And you come out of that conversation being more, I guess, enlightened, more intellectually enlightened. And I think that's really important. That's a really important quality in a cohort of people that will be voting in the future. So I'm glad that so many young people are taking the time to educate themselves. But I also think, the presence of social media in itself, for one, accelerates learning about social issues, but also hinders your actual impact. So, yeah.
I guess one positive aspect of the social media activism thing would be, I'm sure you probably know this, but Trump rallies, K-pop Twitter and TikTok, they were buying tickets so that no one would show up to the Trump rally.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Camille, do you want to take that one?
I mean, yeah, I think that to an extent, performative activism can be a little bit damaging insofar as that the impact is just that, it's just performative. But I also think that we live in the age of information, and in addition, or the reason that our generation is more informed, or at least a little bit more politically involved or passionate about these things, is because we have more access to information. And so while your activism shouldn't stop at sharing an Instagram story, it's definitely helpful. And I think that, I mean, I would be lying if I said that I didn't learn something from when somebody shared like an infographic or something on Instagram. But yeah, for sure. In terms of just like digital activism, K-pop stans are like a very strong force on Twitter, and TikTok teens. But yeah, they. I think that's a good thing if you're anti-Trump. Whether it's a good or bad thing is irrelevant, I guess. But I think most of us can say that it had like a very large impact that a lot of people didn't see coming, and it's kind of an example of like young people mobilizing towards political action.
For sure.
Well, on the flip side of that, what are you guys like? How do you feel about people spreading the joke about vote for Kanye and stuff like that? Because this could go pretty far.
I think, maybe this is just like the environment that I'm exposed to, but a lot of people are like, don't vote for Kanye, don't waste your vote like that. You have a privilege to vote in this country. It is an actual privilege to vote in this country. You know, a lot of people, like, they are prevented from voting in the places that they live. They can't meet those times where the voting polls close. And, it's a privilege to vote. So don't waste your vote on somebody who is probably going to throw away the presidency, right?
Yeah.
If you want actual change, and you want to vote Trump out, vote for someone who like has the ability to do that. Don't vote for someone who will throw away the presidency, and you will throw away your vote. So
for sure. I definitely seen like an overwhelming amount of people say that we shouldn't vote for him, and to be honest, I don't know a single person who has voted for him. But I think it's a good thing. I think it's a good thing that like the general public is in favor of like not supporting this random celebrity candidate.
Yeah. I don't know. I think it's just because our generation really likes memes, and so certain things, whether or not people are supporting vote for Kanye, it spreads because some people view it as a joke. They might not necessarily vote for him because they think it's a joke, but they're going to spread it on social media, and then that kind of disrupts the important conversations that we should be having.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, so this last segment that we're going to do is basically a call to action telling Asian and, Gen Z Asians, millennial Asians especially, to be politically active and to vote in the upcoming election.
Oh, I guess, Camille, do you want to take this one?
Sure. Yeah, so I think right now we're seeing a big problem with millennials and like people who are in Gen Z being like maybe registered to vote, but just like not going out to vote. There's just like a low turnout overall. And I think that it's like a very large voting block, and whatever political party these people predominantly support, if they went out and voted and were mobilized and incentivized to do so, then it would create like huge significant political change.
How do you feel about the whole, well, I don't really like either candidate, so I'm just not going to vote. How do you feel about that type of opinion or perspective?
I think it definitely comes from a place of privilege. People deciding that they aren't going to exercise the opportunity to have a voice in the government or in politics. It's definitely like the two-party system in America is reflective of, centuries of growing political division and kind of a false dichotomy in terms of political ideology. But there's not really a way to fix it if you don't participate in it. If you're just exempting yourself from the situation, nothing is going to happen. You're protesting something, but only like in a very abstract way, not in a material way. So.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's why it's good that organizations kind of like ACE and also like Fresh Off the Broke exist. We are here to mobilize high school students to become politically engaged, to have an opinion, and to recognize that they have the ability to vote and that is valued. And I definitely think that if we could come together and create a bigger effort to register people to vote, to make them understand the importance of their vote and how it actually does change the status quo, I think more people would have an opinion in terms of, who they want to vote for. I think for me personally, I joined ACE when I was, in freshman year, and also in 8th grade, kind of in that between section of time. And I think I was just starting to get into activism and understand what it means to be politically active. And I think by being that, I understand how important voting is. I understand how important my voice is now. I think a lot of people need to recognize that, especially in a time like this where there is political turmoil at every corner. So, yeah.
Thank you so much for having a conversation with us. We thought it was really interesting.
Yeah,
especially
no problem.
having the U.S. perspective, since we can only view from articles.
Yeah.
Right.
Also,
Yeah.
like, I don't know a lot about politics, so.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for having us on. I think it's really important that, we kind of get our voices out there and hopefully make other people see different perspectives. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
If you guys want to find out more about ACE, check out their Instagram at AYCE Vote, and they have their website linked in bio. Thank you guys for watching today's collab. See you next time.